Perfecto.
Okay, I think we are live now. Great. So, hi everyone. It's good to be back here on the Blue Circle workshops. And we'll be starting soon. And we have a very, very interesting topic of discussion today. But before we get to that, with what all we are going to talk about and sharing our experiences, we'll just do a quick round of introduction for both for myself and Gilmario, for those of who don't know us. So, Gilmario, take the stage, introduce yourself.
Okay, perfect. So basically, I've I'm like Gilmario D'Souza. I've been type 1 diabetic for the last 27 years. I was diagnosed when I was 10 years old. I'm insulin dependent, so I've been on insulin pump therapy for the last 8 or 9 years now. Switched between multiple pumps and using a low carb diet, carb counting, stuff like that to better manage my diabetes. And yeah, I think that's enough of diabetes news about me.
Great, great, great. So thanks for being here, Gilmario, to co-host this session with me. And I am Snehal, type 1 diabetic since 21 years. I'll complete 22 like next week or so. But yes, and I am on multiple daily injections and on sensor. So yes, and before we get into this, like you have seen from the topic that we are discussing, drinking and diabetes, we know that the party season is on. There's Christmas, there's New Year's, and there's a lot of events and functions and parties to attend to, and somehow alcohol comes along with it. Like by default, it's there, and then when you're living with diabetes, there's always this question in your head, like, am I allowed to have alcohol? How much should I have it? What should I have it? So we are going to go through all of these questions one by one, share both of our experiences. But before we get on to that, in no way we are promoting drinking alcohol, or and in no way this is medical advice. This is just me and Gilmario sharing our experiences and how we went about trying alcohol and understanding how it affects us and our blood sugars, and the things that you need to take care of. So basically just that, just in no way we are promoting it. Everyone knows that alcohol can cause long term impact, and it can be dangerous to your health. So please keep in mind this disclaimer, that this is not a recommendation to consume alcohol in any way. Okay. So once we have this disclaimer out of the way, we can quickly get started. So I think we'll just start with I had a few pointers to start on with. Like, first would be to understand the functioning of the liver, basically. Like, because when you consume alcohol, the role that the liver plays, it by default comes into action. So basically, what the liver usually does is it stores the extra sugar or glucose from the food that you consume in the liver in the form of glycogen. Okay. So what happens is, throughout the day, or when you're doing various activities, liver will start converting this glycogen into glucose, and then lives it in the bloodstream. So as per your daily activities, if you're working out or you're sleeping, and in those times the liver will do this normal function. Okay. But now what happens when alcohol comes into picture? So alcohol is treated by your liver as a toxic substance, basically. So what it does is it stops its primary function of converting glycogen into glucose, and it will start processing the alcohol in the bloodstream, and then it will start the main action at that point of time. When you have alcohol in your system, it's going to be it will try to process it out of your body as soon as possible. So that is how the liver changes its functioning. Okay. When you're drinking, so it will stop its primary function of releasing glucose in the bloodstream, and it will start working on processing the alcohol in the system. So this could be one of the things, and we will cover like more on how this also impacts. And I think, Gilmar, we also know that drinking also causes, there's like a slow process of digestion. digestion. I have seen that myself as well. Like whatever food you're consuming, it digests very slowly, you know. Like let's say if you're eating something at this point of time, it will start processing in your body around 20 to 30 minutes. But when there's alcohol in the system, the digestion process also slows down. I think these are the two things that we need to be aware of: the functioning of
Yeah.
the liver when alcohol is in your system, and the other thing is that your digestion slows down when there's alcohol in the system. And I think the next thing that we would like to talk about is alcohol induced low sugars or hypoglycemia. So, Gilmere, do you have any instances wherein you faced this sort of course wherein you drank alcohol and then you faced low sugars after that?
Yeah, of course, Neil. I think everybody who has been doing this, like the both of us, with the way that we have been and had the experience to learn. I mean, one of the most important things is the way we consume alcohol. Like you mentioned,
Right.
like you rightly mentioned, the biggest concern usually for alcohol is it prevents your liver from doing its job, and the primary function of the liver is actually taken away. Sometimes you wake up this morning with certain things where you have your sugar suddenly rising. Now what happens is the first thing in the morning your body needs glucose to start functioning, and the liver is one of those organs that produce that kind of glycogen to help your body to start. With alcohol being in your system, like you mentioned, it actually takes away that key role of the liver. And talking about instances where alcohol has significantly impacted me, there was one experience where what was happening is that I started falling into these hypoglycemic areas because I was consuming too much of alcohol, and my body couldn't produce enough of glycogen to wake
Mm.
my body up. Now, I was on an earlier version of an insulin pump at that time, and there was no continuous monitoring that was happening. One more thing to always remember, guys, you need to be responsible and take charge of your own life. If you are deciding to consume alcohol, which again, we are not promoting in any way, but you need to understand that the only person responsible for your actions is yourself, and you should know what your limits are and how much you can consume. Now, like Snail and me have experienced it firsthand for ourselves, we know that we have a certain limit, how much we can take. But getting back to actually our sugars dropping. So sometimes when you've not had enough of food, let's say, and you're just carried away with company, with peer pressure, things like that, and you're just like, okay, you know what, I'm going to keep drinking. I'll eat later. I'll check later. I'll see it later. To not depend on that later, because one of the biggest problems with alcohol is that it will make you believe that you're at the greatest place, happiest moment of your life. But you need to be responsible as a type 1 diabetic for yourself, and you need to know that I need to consume some amount of food before I do that. I've had an instance, like I mentioned, where my liver wasn't able to produce enough of glycogen, due to which early mornings I was going into severe hypoglycemic attacks. This one time I even needed to be hospitalized because of that. And that's when they actually needed to give me a mixture of glycogen to actually wake me up that morning. It had to be injected with IV, and that actually helped me. Now, me and Snehal both, and Blue Circle on the whole, is hoping that you never have to come across these
True.
instances in your life. So, our best example and expressions and thoughts are with you, that if you have these questions, if you have these things, you can always attend these workshops parts. We can also help guide you how much is the right amount of alcohol each person can consume, and how you can actually control and better yourself. Sometimes you don't want to be left out. You have that
Right.
feeling, you're in a group of friends, you're all enjoying, everyone's having a drink. Okay, I'll have one. It doesn't matter. One becomes two, two becomes three. Suddenly, you're losing count of how much you're drinking. You're not getting enough of food into your system, and you're not checking your sugars. So that is the worst part. And I think something that Snehal would also agree is consumption of water during every one of these phases is something that you need to do every time you're consuming alcohol. Unfortunately, we're not as blessed as certain countries, but certain countries have strict norms with things like this. Like in New Zealand, I know this personally, where you get one beer, and every beer that you're offered, you get a glass of water. It's like free. It's like, okay, here you go. Here's your beer. Please have a glass of water. It just helps rehydrate your system, which you want to which you want to always make sure that you're doing.
Yeah, right, right. So one of the key points that Gilmario touched base upon was never have alcohol on an empty stomach. Like we talked about, your digestion process slows down when there's alcohol in the system. So it's always important that you have some food, some carbs in your system, so that and you shouldn't just start with alcohol first. I prefer it that way, that I eat something first and then I move to my first glass of whatever alcohol I'm having. Like, and it's very often that you forget all the small steps when you are in a group of friends or like in company, wherein people just
Correct.
jump on to drinking alcohol first, right? But you have to be cautious that way. It's very important that you eat something. There needs to be some slow releasing carbs in your body with good amount of proteins or fats, and then you move on to having your alcohol, because it's important that your body has some carbs inside, so that in case you are consuming more or the digestion process slows down, there's enough glucose in your body to sustain you. So it's very
Correct.
important that you never have alcohol empty stomach. And I think the second point that Gilmario rightly pointed out was hydration. It's very important that you drink water and not rely on the teeny tiny quantity of water in your alcohol drink. It's always
Exactly.
important. Yeah, because in case things go wrong and you're drunk, or you're having a low sugar, it's not a good sign to be dehydrated, because everything else also starts functioning in the not so proper way. So having enough
Correct.
food before you drink and keeping yourself hydrated are the two important things again. But
Yeah.
again,
Neil, maybe you can touch base on the slow releasing carbs that you were talking about,
yeah,
snacks
yeah,
that you
that's
would
it.
recommend during that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, like for me personally, I would prefer to, even otherwise as well, even if I'm drinking or not drinking, I personally prefer to go with starters. Like chicken starters, or like like veg, non-veg starters, because first of all they are low in carbs. They have good amount of proteins. And also, like at times, like they are marinated in some sort of like a curd, or like any sort of flour, which will have sufficient amount of carbs in it. So basically, I just prefer to have like a chicken starter, or like a paneer chili, or that sort of a dish. I always start any food, like if even if I'm in a party or like anywhere else, I always start with these starters, because first they are really yummy, and second they keep you full, and they are a good source of protein, and you don't indulge into other carbs. Like at times what happens, like
True.
your friends are having like pasta or pizza around you, and you even if you start with that, you will have like a really a bad spike on your blood sugar graph, right? So it's always important to start, like that is my preference. So Gilmer, if you have any other suggestions, do add it.
No, I think, yeah, I think I follow the same strategy completely, Snail. I really
Yeah,
enjoy having my proteins as much as I can. Things like tandoori chicken are my fail
right.
safe, especially when I'm drinking in India. You get tandoori chicken everywhere. Any restaurant that you're going to, anywhere that you sit to drink, a tandoori chicken is like a must for me. The best part is everybody enjoys tandoori chicken, more or
Yes.
less. And it's something that you can share with your friends also, because usually it's like, okay, I can only eat this specific dish, and they're like, okay, let's try a biryani, or like you mentioned, like a pizza or a pasta. In that case, then you're always contemplating, okay, I can't have this, I'll have to have something separate. Will they enjoy having this with me? So there are all these questions and these thoughts that probably run through your head. They of course run through mine. So tandoori chicken,
True.
that's my fail safe number one dish whenever I'm out drinking. Always order for a tandoori chicken, and it's always there on their menu, most of the places, and it's delicious as
Right.
hell. So it always works.
True, true. And I think any sort of chicken kebabs, like you get a lot of flavors and a lot of variety. Any sort of chicken kebab in Indian flavors or Chinese flavors or Mexican flavors, whatever you like. Same goes for paneer
True.
as well. Or you can have this dish like vegetables, like the stir fried vegetables. You get that as a starter in a lot of places. So they
Yeah.
provide you with good amount of carbs, like a sufficient amount of carbs, good amount of proteins, and like a slow release in the system, wherein you don't have a chance of like going into a hypo later on. Now let's get back to alcohol. Now we know that there are like different types of alcohols, and there's a lot of confusion on which alcohol has how much content of alcohol and how much content of carbs. So let's start with individual alcohols. I would say, like, what are your thoughts on beer? Let's start with that. I think growing up, I think that was my first drink. Like when I started into my journey into like having alcohol. I think I
Your
started with beer.
journey. I like how you've chosen those words. My journey into alcohol. Nice.
Yeah, yeah.
But
So
nice.
I
I
think,
think
yeah,
yeah. You go ahead first, Neil. Then
yeah,
I'll
yeah.
talk about beer.
So basically, beer. Everywhere if you google stuff, it would say like beer will have that tendency to reduce your blood sugars, but don't just go by that. It depends on which beer you're having, what are the contents of that. It's a light beer, it's a strong beer, so you have to take into consideration all of these factors as well. So if it's a light beer, it will have lesser amount of carbs. If it's a stronger beer, it will have like a more number of carbs in that. And obviously the alcohol content in beers, especially if you're drinking in like any restaurants or anything, there it's a little less on the lesser side. So basically you can go ahead having 1 can or 2 can. That's like no one will stop you to have that. But you have to be aware that it can lead to low sugars as well. And the two factors on which the low sugars depend is already what we talked on, is your liver functioning and your slow digestion. So again, it's very important that you eat, you keep yourself hydrated, and then you start drinking. And if you're someone who's like, you're like a teenager and you're just starting to drink, or like, so you have to always be aware that, like Gilmario said, like you are the one who's responsible for your health, but also make sure that the friends around you or the people with whom you're going out, they know your condition. Don't hide it from them,
Correct.
because in case something goes wrong, they know what to tell the doctor, or
What to
like
do?
how to
Yep.
take care of you, like in worst case situations. But always ensure that you yourself are adept in handling situations. Like you have your glucometer, you have your sensor, you have your insulin, you have your glucometer tabs, you have your sugar with you. And like Gilmario said, that you have to check your sugars as well. So when I started, I was very cautious as a person as well. Like I didn't want to be in a situation where I need someone else's help. So I checked my blood sugars when before I started to drink, when I was drinking, somewhere in between, and even afterwards. So that's how I understood like which alcohol affects my blood sugars in what way, and how much of a quantity can I have without like being drunk or like losing my senses. So it's always important that you check. And if it's your first step into drinking, it's always important that you, like I said, you have to check 3 times: before, during the course of it, and after your blood, like after you finished drinking. It's always important to keep a tab of your blood sugars. And like once you know which alcohol suits you, or like what is your limit, I think after that you can be a little less like you can reduce the number of blood sugar checks. But initially it's always important that you keep a good tab of your blood sugars. And if you're not on the sensor, it's always recommended to check on a glucometer. And like Gilmero said, don't just push it on to later. It's important, if you feel like you have to check your blood sugars, just do it then and there itself.
Correct.
Yeah. So
Yeah. So
Gilmero, you have anything to share on beer specifically?
yeah. So basically, with beer, now usually I dislike beer as much as I can think of it. But with the way the temperatures currently are, things are hot. You're just like, I'll have one beer just to feel a little cool, just to do that, and you end up drinking one, or one sometimes becomes two, like Snehal said. The thing is that beer has carbs, though, yes, it definitely does because of the wheat present in it that it's made from.
Yes,
But
yes.
something else that kicks in into beer is calories, guys. Like beer will put you on weight no matter what,
Yes.
just like other alcohols. So you need to be really careful. I personally avoid beer as much as I can. Something that in India we tend to do usually is while pouring a glass of beer, we have this tendency, we tilt the glass a little, then pour our beer in, make sure that no froth is wasted, none of that carbon dioxide gets out. Uh, I have started doing this when I used to drink a lot of beer earlier. I learned it from a friend of mine. I just keep my glass standing straight. I used to just pour the beer straight into it and get all that gas out as much as I could. With beer, I used to usually feel really full and stuff like that. But after I started following this principle, right, of just letting all that gas out, usually how the Europeans drink beer with a sufficient amount of head, what happened is, what I realized is I liked drinking the beer then. It didn't give you that sick, nasty feeling of, I'm feeling too full, feeling uneasy. It was more lighter, more pleasant to have with your food. But you restrict yourself and always time yourself between beers. That's the most important thing. And like Snail said, if you're checking your sugar 2 or 3 times, between your drinks, how you're doing it, or if you're on a sensor, even better, you'll see that spike happening. So you know that, now, like, no one can ever stop you to do something or tell you that, don't do this or don't do that. But like I mentioned earlier as well, you're in charge, your own responsibility. So if you're having a drink, you feel that, okay, maybe I can slow down, my sugars are, going too high. Take a break for sometimes. Follow a principle, like something that Nupur loves doing: eat peanuts. Peanuts is her favorite pastime. I think Snehal does too.
Yeah,
Me as well. I mean, I mentioned tandoori chicken, but the peanuts work great as
yeah,
well. And just keep munching on some peanuts and just, try and maintain, balance yourself. When you're feeling hungry, you get your stomach a little full as well. You feel better. The more your stomach is full, the better you feel. You can have smaller, lesser amounts of alcohol, and you're feeling great with it. So,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that's more or less what I think about beer. I avoid it on all costs as much as I can, but the weather just gets to me sometimes. So
True, true, true. And another thing that you talked about was uh, that you feel full if you have too much of alcohol. So that's why it's very important to have food before you start drinking. What happens if you're like
correct.
having 1 or 2 glasses of alcohol and then you feel like you don't want to eat anymore. So that can be like it can put you in a dangerous situation blood sugar wise. So it's very important that you eat first and then move on to like having your alcohol. Okay.
Yeah,
I
like talking
so
about
yeah,
blood
like
sugar as well. There's one more thing where, you're drinking too much alcohol. What happens is it just makes, if you've had too much to drink, for example, you've gone over your limit of 4 or 5 drinks maybe, and you start feeling dizzy, sleepy,
yeah,
disoriented. These are very similar symptoms that you face with hypoglycemia. Now you
true.
need to be careful and understand. Now, suppose your sugar is rising, but you are drunk as well. It's really difficult for, let's say, a close friend or a family member who's with you to understand that whether the alcohol is causing those symptoms or whether it is your sugar. And if you're not on the sensor, it is something to definitely be careful about. So, like Snail mentioned as well, always check beforehand what you're drinking, have that experience, understand what it is, and while you want to stay away, you want to keep your sugar under control at a proper level, but you don't want to fall into hypoglycemia while you are drinking too much, because that would be the worst of the combinations that you could go with.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult to differentiate between the symptoms of a hypoglycemia or if it is because you had too much alcohol or you're like tipsy or you're drunk,
Exactly.
because the symptoms are very similar. Feel weak, there's like slurred speech, or you have difficult walking or like difficulty in walking, or there's like confusion, there's like a disorientation of the mental state. So these are very very common symptoms between a hypo and if you're like tipsy or you're drunk. So it's very important to always be aware of what your blood sugars are and know that this is not because of low blood sugar, and it's just a
Correct.
symptom of having alcohol. So that's that. And I think we'll move on to the second sort of alcohol that people like to consume is wine, my favorite as well. So yes, so wine in general has a little more content of alcohol, so people usually stick to just 1 glass or 2 glass. So a typical serving of a wine glass would have anywhere between 12 to 15 gram of carbs, I would say, but depending on what wine you are having. So there's red wine, there's white wine, there's rosé, there's sparkling. But under my experience, I feel that the sparkling wine has a lesser impact on my blood sugars as compared to red wine, so I completely avoid red wine because that
Same.
immediately causes my blood sugars to spike. I stick to white wine or like a glass of rosé maybe, and in that, if there's a sparkling option available, then that's all the way more better, because for me that does not impact my blood sugars as much as like a normal wine or like a red wine does.
So, do you have any brand snail that you recommend or that you like or that you prefer, like a Prosecco or I don't know,
Nothing is
maybe a Brut,
yeah.
Chandon?
So Prosecco, like if you follow me on social media, so you know that I am a wine lover. Like I absolutely love wines, and my go-to drink is always like a glass of Prosecco. For me, that like I can like even like on my basil without any bolus, like and just eating like peanuts or like chicken without any additional bolus, I can take like 2 glasses of Prosecco or like a sparkling white wine, but that works for me. So and I am here
Oh,
at this stage wherein I know what works for me, because I have checked my blood sugars quite often when I started drinking wines. So it's and we always emphasize on the fact that each body is different, so what works for
exactly.
someone may not work for you. So you have to always be wary, you have to check your sugars, and then you can understand like how it's impacting your blood sugars, and do you really need to take a bolus if you're just having like 1 glass of wine. So depending on that, I like to have Prosecco, I like to have like a glass of rosé maybe, or like a glass of white wine. I clearly stay away from red wines because that immediately spikes my blood sugars. Even just like a 1 glass of red wine will give me a spike of 300, like with along with the
Wow.
food. And what happens is like red wine is like the dessert wine, like it's you're given it with desserts. It's at the last course of the meal. So there's usually like something sweet and then there's red wine, so a combination of both of these is definitely going to give you a big spike on your blood sugar. So be wary of that as well.
True. So I think with wines mostly, I kind of avoid red wine myself as well for the same reason that, like Snehal has mentioned multiple times, everybody's body is different. Different alcohols react differently to different people. But like her, I've noticed a spike in my sugar as well. The only time I ever pair red wine is when I'm cooking. Like if I'm doing like a steak or somewhere along
Yeah,
those things, I need to marinate my meat. That's where I'll probably use some red wine to get the flavor out of the meat. But apart from that, I would completely avoid red wine as much as I could. My favorite wines would have to be somewhere, mostly dry wines is what I prefer, and whites. So Sauvignon is one of my favorites, always heading for it, and sparklings, of course.
yeah.
So the brute is always there. I'm a bit allergic to rosé because of certain
Mhm.
grapes, like the Zinfandel doesn't really work
Yeah.
for me. Every time I tried that, I was always not feeling well the next day. And first, I always kept blaming something else. I was like, no, it was probably the pork, it was the food. Because I was like,
Yeah.
alcohol though can't be bad only. That's not possible. But, well, it was. But given the choice, wine is a really good option always. A glass of wine is really beneficial to your body as well. And again, we're not promoting drinking in any way. We're just recommending from our personal experiences
True.
what
Yeah.
works for us, what works better for us. So
Yeah.
I
So
think
you have
after
to
wines, yeah,
yeah.
sorry,
So you also have to be aware of the alcohol content in the drink that you're
correct.
having, plus the carbs which are there. So like a combination of both. So alcohol content will be like how powerful your drink is and how quickly you start seeing the symptoms of drinking alcohol. And the carb, again, as we know, it will impact your blood sugars, right? So a combination of these two, you have to be aware of that. But like I said, like beer, I would say, like in India you mostly get like a lighter beers, so they would have anywhere between 4 to 7% of alcohol, I would say. And for wine, depending on which brand or like how strong it is, it will be anywhere between 14 to 15% of alcohol in the wine bottle per se. So you have to be like aware of what alcohol you're choosing, how much you're planning to have, like 1 glass, 2 glass, or 1 can, 2 can, depending on that, and obviously the alcohol content in that drink. And I think Next, we can move on to something that everyone initially starts with, is having this cocktails, which is like, it feels like it has lesser amount of alcohol, so you can like just have one and be done with it. But a key thing here to note is, it's when you're having these cocktails, it's not just the alcohol that you have to be aware of, it's also the mixers that it comes along with, right?
They
So
are the
they are
worst. Yeah.
usually, yeah, like they are usually, there will always be like Coke, Thumbs Up, or soda, or like there will be, definitely there will be some sort of sugary substance. Like for I realized it quite late. Like initially, when I used to hang out with friends, I used to have a glass of Cosmopolitan, and then I was like, "Why my sugar is so high?" Like I didn't have like a lot of alcohol. Then I realized like they do add uh like the small shot of cranberry juice, to make it sweet, and that cranberry juice is really high on sugars. So you have to take note of what mixers they are mixing in your cocktails, because for me, and now I steer clear of cocktails, because even if you say that person not to add anything, but they are definitely going to add something to make it a little sweeter. And there are like a lot of mixers which are available out there, and they are very high on sugars.
Yeah, with cocktails, also something that comes to mind and always comes to my mind is, sometimes you always think that, okay, I can have like a Bloody Mary or a drink,
Yeah,
something along those lines. Now, all your processed concentrated juices, they are the worst. They have so much of sugar content in them. And it's not like they're using any sugar free options whenever they're making
true,
these. It's
true,
never like they're using something that's fresh ground fruit that you can probably substitute and use that. These are always processed drinks that they're using, real Tropica, stuff like that.
true.
And it is horrendous for your sugars. Trust me. I was a victim of this because I was like, oh, it's 100% natural. Real has this
Yeah, same.
concentrated fruit concentrate is bad. It is the worst thing you can drink. You're better off getting an orange at home, peeling it or juicing it yourself, and having that juice rather than buying like a ready premix orange juice, because those will majority of the time always have sugar, no matter what brand you're drinking.
Mm. And these are usually what they add into cocktails. Like even if you go for
Cocktails,
a
yeah.
mojito, they will have this concentrated lemon syrup, which
Cordial,
is
yeah.
very, very high in sugars. So it does give you a good taste of having like a lemony or a citrusy flavor, but it comes with very high sugar quantity. So it's very important that you stay clear of these, like especially cocktails, because by default they will always have some sort of a high sugary content, or like some sort of a mixer which will not help your blood sugars at all. No?
Very
And even
true.
like, even if I have to like bring this mixers thing up, like I was quite a big fan of this hazelnut coffees, like I used to love them. But then I realized like they no way they add like real hazelnut. It's just like a hazelnut syrup bottle that they get and they add it. And then I asked that person, like, just show me that bottle, like, and I wanted to check the sugar content.
The
That was
nutritional
very,
facts, yeah.
it was very high in sugars. And then I was like, okay, now this needs to get out of my life, like, because I used to love it and I used to have it quite often, and before I realized that the sugar content in that is like really, really high. So another quick,
Rohan has some advice on this one. He's like,
yeah.
don't mix red meat.
He says don't mix that.
But yeah,
Yeah, we'll come to that as well. We'll come to that as well. But like, especially for teenagers, it's very common to start with cocktails, because it's
correct.
not too high in alcohol. You will not feel tipsy with one glass. And if you just want to try something with your friends, you will usually go for cocktails. But then, like, if you're
Agree.
living with diabetes, it's important to know that it's not just lesser amount of alcohol, but then it's also like a high amount of sugar that comes along with that. Yeah. But another good option to try out is like, if you're having any sort of a cocktail, you can definitely ask them if they have like a sugar free variant, which most of the
Oh,
places don't have. That is another issue. But if you're having like, let's say, rum and coke, maybe then you can go for rum and diet coke. Like always, a diet coke is a better option. Like sugar
yeah.
wise, I am not talking about the long term implications of having diet coke or that, but if you're having like a drink, it's important that you switch on to better options, and you have to be open and ask the people at the restaurant, like, do you have these options, and you have to like push it through their head that you need a diet coke. You cannot even by mistake replace it with a regular coke or with a
Regular
regular
Coke.
Pepsi, you know. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I think this
I
is
think,
something that when we had met for the Bombay meet, I
yeah,
think that was a few years ago, when I was super surprised because, like, I've been drinking for a long time, let's put it that way. But I think it was, I don't know if it was you, Snail. I think you had wine that day, but I think it was
yeah,
someone
I
else. I
did.
don't remember. And they asked for like a Long Island iced tea. Okay, like for me, a Long Island iced tea is like a toxic dream. It is like something ki, theek hai, it's not going to cost me much and it's going to get me totally high. So let's go for a Long Island iced tea. However, a majority of the ingredient of your Long Island iced tea is Coke. That is
Yeah,
what it is made of. And
yeah,
it was Neeraj, yeah, I remember. And I was so surprised when Neeraj just goes like, so give me the Long Island iced tea and don't pour the Coke in, just give me a Diet Coke. And I was
yeah,
like, wow, that was like a revelation for me. I was just like, oh my gosh, that is such a brilliant idea because alcohol
yeah,
by default, like as we'll cover later as well, doesn't really contain as much sugar, per se, if you're having neat spirits. But and mixing that with like a Diet Coke just keeps your sugars under perfect control. So
true.
Long Island iced tea with Diet Coke is a go-to, I think, if you
Yeah.
really want to try a cocktail. But yeah, that's pretty high in alcohol. So
But see, you need to be aware of these options. Unless and until you see someone
correct.
doing it or you know about this, you will never think of asking at the restaurant or like at the bar that, like, can you replace the Coke with a Diet
Something.
Coke?
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's important to like have these discussions around alcohol, because everyone here knows that it's not good for your health, but there's also this thing that even if you want to avoid it, at times you cannot. Or like me,
Correct.
you just enjoy alcohol and you're in control with it. You know how it affects your body, so it's not like 100% like just don't have it, or like just stop having it. If you have to, you just have to be cautious around these things, because you are a person living with diabetes, right? And this diet coke tip really works. It helps with a lot of drinks that you're planning to have, or like you already have. Like, just switch your regular coke to diet coke. Like, one of the examples Gilmero gave was the Long Island iced tea,
Long Island iced tea.
or yeah, or the like the rum and coke, which is like a popular drink as well. So just switch to rum or a diet coke, and your sugars will thank you for that.
Yeah, like JD and Coke also, because I was always like, I love JD. I love JD. Unfortunately, mixing Coke into that, like a JD can premix, I was like, damn it, it's always going to take my sugar up. But with the Diet Coke experiment, I realized it's not as sweet as I would have imagined it to be. And
Right.
it tastes the same. And it doesn't have that ridiculous spike that comes after when I'm drinking something with carbonated drinks. So it was a great feeling to actually replace these, like Snehal pointed out, most of these drinks that you actually enjoy and like, just
Yeah.
mix them with Diet Coke and it goes a long way.
True. And guys, if you have any questions on any sort of alcohol, or like what to do and how much to have, just feel free to put them in the comment sections, and we can answer them as much as we know. And I think we'll move on to the next topic, is the hard drinks, like scotch or
The
whiskey,
hard
stuff like
drinks.
yeah, that's what you call them, right? So the hard drinks like whiskey, or scotch or gin, or like if you have like tequila, all of these are like basically 0% carbs, but like we said, like it definitely depends on what mixers you're mixing with that, and like Rohan mentioned, it's always better to have neat. But then again, if you're having like a glass of whiskey, you can just have it with ice, regular water, or a diet coke. But again, if you're mixing it with thumbs up, or you're mixing it with coke or Pepsi, then it becomes like a little difficult to understand how it's going to impact your blood sugars. So just take note that hard liquors will definitely not, like, they are the best to have, I would say, if you're a person living with diabetes, because they have 0% carbs in them. But again, what you mix it with, that is what will define your blood sugars and how it's going to impact you.
Yeah. Like again, we're reiterating we do not promote drinking. We're not
Yes.
recommending that this is what you do. Just that this is from our own personal experience, our own ideas, what we've had. We've tried and tested methods that hard alcohol, like Snehal pointed out, especially spirits, they always have this feeling where your sugars will not go up as long as you're mixing it with something like water, like something that I do. My favorite like is gin, and I love experimenting with different types of gin, but gin goes the best always as cocktails. So I tried started doing something very different. Like a GNT is what usually people would recommend. Like, okay, a
Right.
gin and tonic is how I could go. I just took the tonic off as well because I noticed that most of the Schweppes that you get usually do have some amount of sugar too.
True.
And I
True.
just replaced that with plain soda if I had the option, or I just go with plain water. Now, water works like a miracle for me. I know that I have my limit is like 4 drinks. I'm not going to have more than 4 drinks no matter what the issue is. And four is still pushing it. I would, if I'm going out to have a good time, I know like 1 or 2 drinks is enough. I need to come home. At home, I know that there are people who are aware of my condition, know what it is like. Sitting at home, having a drink with family, making sure I'm at a full stomach is the best way that I love to go with drinking, usually when I am. Now, with gin, like I mentioned, same logic with water. It goes really well together. Something else that I just had a conversation today with my cousin, though, actually, since he was down. And I started stepping into bars before I moved to gin. And I was having vodka, right? So I'd go for like a green apple vodka or one of the flavored vodkas. And I'd be like, okay. And they'd be like, okay, sir, should I get some juice or some Sprite? And I'd be like, no, buddy, get me a glass of water. The look on the waiters' faces was horrendous. They couldn't believe that someone was drinking vodka with water. They were like, "Sir, are you sure? Pakka ho na? Like this will work." And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, that's exactly what I want." Because I noticed that drinks like vodka, gin, one, though they were already low in calories and they were also low in carbs, they helped and helped me benefit so much. Like I did not quit drinking per se, but I just lowered these kind of drinks that I was having, replaced things like water where I could replace it for Coke, things like that, and just made sure that my meals were more covered, more balanced. Like how we balance our meals while eating. The same way I made sure my drinks were more balanced with carbs and fats and proteins and whatever I wanted to at that time. So it just helped me a great deal, with things like that. So loved that experience really.
Yes, definitely. So again, like there's we touched base upon all different types of alcohols that usually people have or like which are usually available, and how you can make it a little bit more friendly for your blood sugars. So and again, like another thing is like my favorite drink other than wine is Jägermeister, so it's really high in alcohol, but usually people have it with Red Bull, but Red Bull is again like really high in sugars. Now there's also an option of a sugar free Red Bull, so like Gilmero said, always better to like switch options to which are less in sugars or which are low carb again, so that will definitely make you have like a good experience when you are having alcohol. There's one question. How does alcohol affect your appetite, and what can I eat to maintain a balanced diet while consuming alcohol? So I think we already touched base on that. Like if there's alcohol in your system, your digestion process definitely slows down and you feel fuller, like even if you're not eaten anything, you even with the 2 glasses of anything or one pint of beer, you will already start feeling full. So your appetite definitely reduces. You don't feel like eating food, and that's when the whole problem can start, like if
Correct.
there's like insulin in your body and you're having alcohol, you're already starting to feel low sugars if you have not eaten anything. So that's why we emphasize that never eat on empty stomach, and even if you're drinking, always ensure that you eat something first before you move on to having alcohol, right? Yeah, Rohan has also
Correct.
given a good option. There's this brand called as Shunya, uh, and Diet Coke. Like it's like a mixer sort of a thing. That Shunya works really well. But for me, I don't enjoy it that much because it has like an aftertaste. So I just prefer Diet Coke
Yeah,
versus
I
Shunya.
prefer water. I think water is my best bet with
What?
whatever I'm mixing, be it whiskey,
True.
be it scotch, be it vodka, be it gin. I think water just helps me feel so much refreshed, so much better. And let's be honest, guys. I mean, I don't know if y'all are really scotch drinkers or ever had it, but you don't want to be diluting and spoiling the taste of the scotch by adding something as terrible as Pepsi into it. Like, imagine you're drinking a nice 18-year-old Glenfiddich bottle and you add Coke in it, or I don't know, something to ruin that taste. This is a good single malt scotch. You don't even want to add enough of water, just on the rocks is such a
Yeah.
brilliant way to go. But of course, like we pointed out, you take a nice little 30 ml of your drink. See, those who drink have to enjoy it responsibly, and those who are diabetic have to be able to take care of themselves responsibly after they're consuming that alcohol. So I would just say enjoy it, experience it, and just know where your limits are, how you can manage it. So it's always better to go that way.
Spoken like a true connoisseur, Gilberto. That's great. But we touched based upon alcohol induced hypo as well, like alcohol induced low sugars. We touched base on that. But there's also another thing that you have to note of, that it can also lead to a hyperglycemia.
Hi.
Like depend on the mixers that you had, or like the if you have like any high carb food, usually people have pizzas or like French fries, or like pastas along with your drinking. So it could also be like the other side of it. Like you could also have like high sugars. So you have to also be cautious about that. But you will know this thing only when you check your blood sugars. So it's very
Correct.
important that you keep a tab of your blood sugars, check it. Even better if you're on sensor, but always be aware that you have to know your blood sugars and what food you're consuming along with that. And I think the
Very true.
worst part of alcohol would be like if you're too drunk and you're vomiting or you're puking. And that's when everything that we talked about is like staying hydrated comes into picture. But just in case, like if you're someone who's had too many of a drinks, and you're vomiting, you feel dehydrated, it's always important to ask for help. Check in with your friends or your family, whoever is there nearby, and ensure you relate, like tell them that you are someone who lives with diabetes, so that they can give special attention to your needs, and not just be like, okay, this is just another case of someone being too drunk. Because that can
Correct.
happen a lot. So it's
Yeah,
always
especially because you're diabetic. Yeah, you don't want people to just overlook the fact that, okay, ye to daru pee ke gir gaya types, or he's had too much of alcohol, that's why he's fallen. You don't want to be taken into that category, because as a type 1 diabetic, you need your doctor to be aware. You need your people around you to be aware that, okay, this could be a diabetic related incident. We need to make sure that we get his sugars down. We need to be able to take care of him, and the only way that somebody can help you is, one is if they are aware of what is happening to you, or two, you're in a position to tell them that this is what I had. Maybe the food was bad, maybe my stomach is upset, maybe the alcohol didn't agree with me. Like I mentioned, right, the first time I tried the Zinfandel for the rose, it wasn't okay with me. I was feeling so uneasy. The only way I could feel better now, I mean, it sounds a little gross, but it kind of answers Nopal's question as well. I needed to get that out of my system.
right.
And maybe when you're with company, with friends, your reaction would always be like, no, I can't puke, or I can't do this, or it'll
Yeah.
look embarrassing, it'll look bad. But remember, you puking is your body's way of making you feel better. Just like your
Right.
liver knows that alcohol is poison, you getting that out of your system will make you feel better. Once you do that, you'll automatically be in a better place. Your body will stop kind of attacking itself to stop it from, making you feel uneasy. Keep drinking water. That is your number one savior, especially when you've had too much to drink. If you're not feeling well, whatever the cases are, water is my number one go to. Just keep drinking water, flush your system out completely. You'll be in a better place. Consult with your doctor or maybe a local family member who you can say that this is what I did, what I drank, this is how I felt. Is there a reason why? Because, like we mentioned earlier, the only person who can know your body is yourself. You can depend on other people to maybe help, but you have to have these answers for yourself too, so you can help yourself to actually be there.
Yes. And what Nupu's question is like, what if it gets really worse and people around you don't know if it's a hypo or if it's just a symptom of having alcohol? So when I'm hanging out with my friends, I usually let them know, like, in case I am drunk or I don't know what I'm doing, it's always important. Like, for me, this is like from my personal experience, I let them treat it as a hypo. Because for
Correct.
hyper, I think the side effects of having a hypo are way too dangerous for me or for every anyone who's living with diabetes, than a hyper, like hyper. Okay, like let's say my sugars are 300 or 350 and I'm drunk and people around me don't know what to do, but I know that by tomorrow I'll get back in the scene, like in I will manage my sugars in a better way. But imagine if you're like at a 40 and you're having symptoms of being drunk as well as having a low sugar, and people around you don't know what to do. I always tell my friends to treat it as a low sugar and immediately give me sugar, like in any
Correct.
form. So there was this one instance wherein somehow I was having like a bad low day through the day, like, and whatever sugar I was carrying with me was already finished, and then we went out partying, and again I had a low sugar, and I checked my blood sugars on the glucometer and I realized like I'm hanging around at like 50 or something, and I had no sugar with me. So now what do you do in this case? Like obviously be open, ask for sugars at the restaurant if they have it. That's well and good. And in case if they don't have sugar as well, that was just one case wherein I switched to having like Coke. I told him like give me in the shot glass, just give me a Coke, and I shot like I had like two shot glasses of Coke, because I know that Coke is very
Correct.
high in sugars, and even just like two like 30 ml of Coke will bring my sugars up. So it's
Back up.
very important to be aware of your options, in case you don't have your glucovita tabs, in case there's no sugar which is available. So you need to be aware to think of what other option is there in the close vicinity that can help you bring your sugars up. So
Yeah.
I have not had like a soft drink since 8+ years now, but that was just the one time, I think 2 to 3 years ago, when I was in a very bad low, and I had no sugar nearby. The restaurant person was not being kind enough to give me a sugar from the kitchen, so I told him like just give me like a little bit of Coke, and then that brought
Correct.
my sugar up. So you have to be
Yeah.
always aware of things that can go wrong or what your options are.
Correct. The same things actually that me and Snail were talking about earlier. Coke, your fruit juices, your concentrated juices. These are things that you can get at a bar easily, the same place that's making your cocktail. And if you
Yeah.
feel like you're in a hypo, you can't, you'd rather be in a hyper than a hypo every time I'm consuming alcohol at least. Same like Snehal, I have the same experience. I'd rather my friends, my family, everyone is aware that get my sugar up because I can take a dose from a syringe, even bring it down later. But if it is low, there's not much I can do to get it up. And as long as I can, actually dilute, drink and swallow things, your best option is
Yeah.
a glass of Maza. Like I've done this, a similar
True.
incident like Sneha, just taken like a 30 ml, 60 ml, two sips of Maza, had that. But then I know that I need to stop because sometimes you feel like okay it's going low, I'll keep drinking, then it's going to go ridiculously high, and you don't want that experience either. So two, I think 60 ml roughly of a sweet
Yes.
drink should be more
Yeah.
than enough
Any
to
sweet.
get your sugar back to a decent enough place, and to know your limit and to know that there will always be tomorrow, guys. So you can stop that party there, make sure your health, your well-being comes first. So you can leave to go home, you can ask somebody to drop you home, and then just continue with that, because you can always come back to that party. It be it a wedding, be it a situation, be it a friend's birthday, it's okay, it'll be back next year. It's all right, but your health is the most important, and as long as you can take care of yourself, you can come back to that. You can apologize, I'm sorry I had to leave, my sugar was not on my side this time, but it's all right, I'm well and better today. So that's my take to the entire scenario.
Agree with you, Gilmario. Also, like if you're vomiting, there's also a chance that your sugars are on the higher side and it can lead to a DKA as well. So, like we have said 100 times already, that you have to keep yourself hydrated, to avoid getting on a very high sugars, or to avoid getting in a situation where you land up in a DKA. Also, like we will get back to the question in the comments, but before that, another important thing I would like to highlight is like in case you are very low on sugars and you have a glucagon, or your doctor or whoever is there in the ER wants to give you a glucagon, just be aware that glucagon will not work the way it is intended to work if you have alcohol in your system. So basically
Correct.
glucagon is a hormone which tells your liver to reduce more sugar from its reserves, but if your liver is not functioning the proper way, and you even if you give a glucagon, it's not going to help. So you have to like be aware of that, like glucagon in these conditions may not work as it's intended to work. So it's always important that you as a person living with diabetes are aware of all of the situations. It may sound too overwhelming or like too much when we talk about it in all of it in one go, but you start very slow, just like have just one drink, check your blood sugars 3 times like I said, and then understand how it's impacting your blood sugars. And then you can move on, you can try, you can experiment and see how alcohol is affecting your blood sugars, what food and combination with alcohol works for your blood sugars. So it's always important to check, understand how it's impacting your body, and then maybe you can be a little bit free and a little bit open when you're parting with your friends, right?
Correct. Very true,
Yeah.
Snail.
Yeah. So there's this question of like, how do you convince your family or doctor that you can drink responsibly at times? That's a tough one, because if I have to be in the position of a doctor or a family, I would rather be like, why do you have to have it? When you know it can impact your blood sugars really bad. But like I said, like you have to show, like you have to prove it to them that you can drink responsibly. Like keep on checking it with your
Very true.
parents. Like, oh, now I'm trying to like I'm going to have like a can of beer. Let's see. Now my sugars are this much. Just keep them updated how you're doing, and ensure that your blood sugars are in check. Ensure that you're not drunk, you're not that tipsy. But it comes with your family bonding and like how you gel out with your parents. But it's a tough call to take. But like Gilmario and I said, like you can do it, just you have to take care of all the things that we talked about. Just to reiterate a few things, like keep yourself hydrated, do not drink on an empty stomach, note which alcohol you are having, do they have mixers? If they do, like feel free to ask the bartender or like anyone in the restaurant to switch on to like a diet coke or like water, and don't feel ashamed about that. Like, what is the other person going to think if I ask them to switch it? No, your health is in your hands, so always
Correct.
switch on to better options, and let the people around you know that this is the condition that you're in, and in case your sugars go haywire, they are there to take care of it. And always carry your stuff with you. You need to carry your glucometer, your sugar, your insulin with you, and let your family and friends know where you are. So these are like a few tips, handy tips for, I think, even if you're living with diabetes or not living with diabetes, these are some things that you need to take care of. But with diabetes, I think you have to be wary of your blood sugars at all times.
Especially that, like, I mean, you need to be responsible for your own actions. Like, it's nice to have your family and friends and your doctor to depend on, but like Snail pointed out, it's there, they are right in their own way as per their understanding. And you need to know that, what is more important to you, what it is that you need. If you think that having a drink would make you feel better, you should know that my limit is one drink. Once I get that one drink, I need to stop. This is what's supposed to make me feel better. If it's not making you feel better, then maybe that one drink is not something that's helping you to begin with. So it shouldn't be that one becomes two, two becomes four, four becomes six. We don't want that. Again, we are not encouraging drinking in any way, but like you pointed out, you should know, you should be able to charge that, okay, it does trigger me, this is what's happening. You can talk to them about it. Communication is key. Talk to them, tell them this is how I feel, this is what your words are making me feel. If you really want me to stop it, if you think that you can go ahead and do it. If you feel like you cannot, then tell them I will sit with you and have one drink with you. If that helps you feel better, be
Right.
more open about how you feel, what you want in your life. It makes your life a better place.
Yeah. Or rather, you can show them this video and tell them that you're going to follow all the checklists that we talked about.
Yeah, that works too.
That works too. But yes, and we have a lot of blogs which have been posted in the comment section on how to take care of hypers, or DKA. But again, like Gilmario and I have always pointed out, like this video in no way promotes drinking, or we do not recommend that you have alcohol. But just in case you want to have it, these are our tips and tricks and our shared experiences on how different alcohols have worked for us. And always be like responsible when you're drinking. Again, like don't drink and drive. That is, I think, by default. If you are
Yeah,
someone who's with diabetes and you are consuming alcohol, definitely driving is out of the picture. Like you cannot
the
go ahead and do
question.
that. Yeah, there's definitely that. So yes, I think we have covered almost everything that we wanted to talk about. Gilmer, do you have any final thoughts?
Oh, I think we're all good. I think we have a chart that we wanted to share about the carb counters, but
Yes,
we
yes,
can share
yes.
that later once Nupur posts
Yeah,
the highlights and we have that. So, just like a recommendation, guys, you can go through the points that we'll share, things like that. But at the end of the day, it is your responsibility always, and always drink responsibly. Don't, like, this is my logic, right? If I'm drinking, I'm in charge. I should not be a burden to somebody else. I am responsible for my own actions, so you have to be responsible for your own.
true, true. And again, we'll put in the comment section a chart which explains the alcohol content and the carbs, like the carb content of different drinks. We'll put that in the chat section. But I think that's all for today. And thank you everyone for joining us on another Blue Circle workshop. I hope that this was helpful. And if you have any comments, questions, please feel free to add it in the comment section. Any one of us will be here to reply back to them. And we will see you next time, same time, Sunday, 5 to 6 p.m. Here. And do not forget to follow us on all social media platforms. We are there on YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, you name it, and we are there. So show us some love, follow us there for some fun behind the scenes. But yeah, again, like thank you from me and Gilmario, and we will see you next Sunday. Bye bye.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.